Hello, Bill Kenny with Meet here, and I want to welcome you to our webinar, Scale Now, Entering the U.S. Market Through Trade Shows and In-Person Events. It's a real pleasure to have you with us today. This is going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be hopefully interesting and hopefully very thought-provoking. The way we organize our webinars, certainly I'm on screen now. In a moment, I'm going to go off screen and put up some slides. We'll go through those slides, which should sort of give us a lot of sort of base information. And then after that, I'll come back on screen and take any questions that you've submitted, plus answer the questions that were previously submitted when you all went through the registration process. So it's a real delight to have you with us today. We do have people from all over the world who have joined us. Some of you we met last week at Select USA in Washington, and so buckle up. This is going to be a lot of fun, and again, it's great to see you. So give me just a moment to switch over to the slides, and we will be right back with you. So let's see here. We should be there and here. So you should now see my slides, although it's kind of a funny looking screen that came up first. And yeah, now we're over to the slides. So okay, so here's our sort of topic: Scale Now, entering the U.S. market through trade shows and in-person events. The whole goal here, what underpins this whole topic, is the idea of establishing traction and scaling in the U.S. And so this can work on entering any market, but the context and where we're really focused here is helping companies enter the U.S. market and establish traction and scale quickly. And there are real specific techniques that we've learned that optimize this process. So we are very glad to share those with you. So let me just kind of move a couple things around here. And so these are the questions that you all submitted previously. We'll certainly make sure that we address these. I've kind of put them in sort of groups so that we should be able to do a few at a time. And again, feel free in the comment section to add any of the questions you like. So our agenda is real simple. Our topics will come under these headings. So sort of setting the table, we'll identify the common challenges companies have as they enter the US market, and particularly in terms of getting traction and scaling, and then look at some high leverage strategies, and of course, get to your questions. So just so you have some context, and certainly we don't intend for these at all to be promotional, but you should know who's speaking to you. So my name is Bill Kenny. I'm the founder of a company called Meet. We help international business-to-business growth companies soft land and scale. In other words, get traction and scale in the US through trade shows and in-person events. So in other words, we're completely on the revenue generation side. And our services come sort of in four different flavors or four different areas. One is certainly the strategy, which has to be sort of in every conversation. And then staffing will actually execute the strategy. So everything from having people in booths to organizing events and so on. We'll get the executive speaking opportunities, and then we'll do all sorts of sales support, like appointment setting, a variety of competitive intelligence type services. So but again, it kind of comes under those four flavors. So again, the whole idea here is just to help you understand a little bit of the context and in terms of where we're coming from with this content. So let's talk about setting the table. And so we should really look at what the market entry goal is. And you may define it slightly differently, but we're, I think, generally going to be in agreement here. So we want to quickly and efficiently build traction, and we want to maximize the probability of success. And so obviously we need to have that, reasonably quick results in return, but at the same time, we need to underlie that or underscore that with developing systems that allow us to scale success. In other words, empower others to grow and help us grow, and really to leverage all of our infrastructure and adjacent infrastructure. So entering the US, and this is more sort of just a preliminary, it comes with a variety of potential risks and rewards. So on the risk side, everything from diluting your management team focus to resources being diverted from your current and successful markets to various types of reputational risks, such as the market, in your current investors or future investors, partners, and your own team. On the other hand, the rewards, pretty straightforward. Obviously, the U.S. is a large market, and both on the consumer and on the B2B and B2G or business to government side, all those are very large in the U.S. And also we are consumers. There's no mistaking that. So the revenue and profit potentials are very strong. It's obviously also competitive, which brings up sort of another challenge. And then entering the U.S. For many companies can also add to their credibility and help build the systems for future or further global expansion. So one of the things actually we never see talked about, and maybe it's something that is happening in venues that we're not in, but it is very rare of all of the risks that somebody talks about time as a risk. And we actually see it as a pretty big risk. In other words, what happens if after 12 months or 18 months, we haven't established good traction and we haven't seen some wins and successes? Our experience is that the assets of the organization begin to erode. And so what are the assets? So it could be team members, it could be investors, it could be customers, it could be any type of channel partner, any of those type of assets or resources of an organization. If there aren't signs of success, and that may be closed business, it may be commissions paid, it could be all sorts of sort of indicators of success. It's very hard to keep those key assets and resources committed to the mission. Obviously, your team, if they're not seeing sort of sales happen and those types of successes, then they're going to look for what they would consider better challenges. And we're one of the things about the U.S. is we're a competitive, very competitive staffing marketplace. So keeping your team engaged is really important. So when you enter the market, obviously we'd encourage going at your own pace, but there is a risk in slower market entry. And so because of what I just stated in terms of the various resources that you would rely on, those need to be reinforced in some way to sort of know that they're making a good decision. And certainly traction and scaling helps reinforce that. It's just like a good sports team, right? Winning tends to attract the best players, and winning records do that. So the more you can have victories, small and large, the better you'll retain and actually improve all of those assets and resources that will associate with your company. So we're a trade show support or an event support company and our clients are companies that use events, and so this is coming from a certain perspective. But one of the questions we get asked quite frequently is, are trade shows, trade fairs, events still relevant? And again, we're in this space all day long, sort of every day. And here's our perspective is that, it's particularly, and this is focused on business to business or business to government type sales, is that what we see is that all of us that are sort of going to market in that space or those spaces are spending our marketing dollars with the hope of someday getting face to face with a prospect. One of the cool things that events, trade shows, and trade fairs offer is that we are those prospects, if we do this correctly, are in the room. Our job then is to have a methodology to filter the room so that we can find those people fairly easily. And so, and again, get together with them face to face, create that interaction. And really what we're doing in marketing and through this process is, if you look at how we're sort of, ultimately the measure of success, that at least the first metric is, how many appointments with prospects did we create through any marketing methodology, again, in B2B. And so we want to, in order for somebody to agree to an appointment, we've got to go through a few stages, right? First, they have to become aware of us. Then they've got to, there's got to be some level of intimacy that's created. And that could be everything from knowledge about us and maybe even about the problem that they're challenged by. And then, as we get more intimacy, we get to a place where there's trust, or at least enough trust for somebody to agree to a meeting. And so that's really kind of, we're going to go from sort of that awareness to intimacy to trust. And so trade shows fit really well in awareness and getting to a major mass, or a variety of mass groups, or groups of sort of targets, that again, we can do that in person and begin transitioning into that awareness phase, because instead of it being impersonal and electronic, or whatever other modes there might be, it's actually face to face. They actually know we're real. They know what we look like, which can generally get us a little bit further down that marketing funnel and beginning the process of creating some level of intimacy, and obviously relational. And there are a lot of sort of things that would cause somebody to say, I would agree to a meeting. And certainly one is relational would be important. So we're going to share the 6 common challenges that we see when companies are going to trade shows or utilizing in-person events. So these are kind of in not necessarily in order of importance, but they are certainly in some type of priority order here. So the biggest, and this is probably somewhat obvious, and this we see as a challenge across marketing, just not with events, is as the lack of a real clear target focus. You got to know what you're aiming at. So we got to work on that. Second is a misguided strategy. So the idea being that, we're going to Las Vegas and we're pushing all of our chips to, or Monte Carlo, pushing all of our chips to some number, and not really having, sort of hoping for success instead of having a real solid strategy. Not very good alignment between the modes of marketing and the outcomes and the target market that a company is looking for. Quite often we see communication and methodologies that are not localized to, obviously, to the market that a company is entering. And then one of the things, and this may surprise you, and we'll talk more about this, is having the salespeople in the booth. And it to some degree defies logic. Most people say, well, gosh, we should have the salespeople in the booth. I think you'll see as we get into this that that's actually a huge detriment in how you might use events. And then, really bad follow-up. And that one, this may be the most obvious, is, we've created all this potential energy, and it is not unusual at all that companies let that leak out, and it's unfortunate, because obviously we need to convert all the leads that we create, or as many as possible. So let's sort of stop for a minute and talk about a really big concept that's going to underlie sort of everything we talk about here. And it's all about fish. And it's, hopefully you find this really useful. So when you think of somebody that fishes, when they decide they're going to go fishing, they make 3 basic decisions. They decide what they're going to catch. Then they decide where those fish are, the ones that target fish that they want to catch. They decide where they are. Are they in a lake, in a river, in an ocean, and where in that lake, river, or ocean are they? And then finally, they decide what they're going to put in the water, what bait they need to use to attract that specific fish. And so, just to give you a sense of how actually amazing this decision is it, and this is just a very small representation of fish in the bodies of the water of the world, but just to give you a sense, there are 34,000 species of fish in all the lakes, rivers, and oceans in the world. I mean, it's a massive, massive number, 34,000. So it is not a small feat to figure out which one you want to catch. And, most people that fish, they go, oh, I want to catch, salmon today or striped bass or, whatever it is, but they are very specific. And so 34,000 species, there are also actually lots and lots of subspecies. So most people that fish actually not just name the type of fish or the species, but they also name the subspecies. So people that fish get targeting. Those of us that market need to much better understand it. People that fish actually, and the trick that we need to learn from them is they eliminate 33,999 types of fish that they might catch or species that they might catch, and they focus on one. And so everything they do is aligned with that. In other words, once they know what they want to catch, they go to the water where they suspect that fish is, and they might test a variety of different areas, a variety of different lakes or streams or areas of the ocean. They're going to test different depths. They're going to test different times of the year. They're going to test everything. People that fish get the whole idea of marketing. And then finally, they're going to test baits. People that fish don't use one kind of bait mostly. They'll test different types, particularly people that do fly fishing. My goodness, they have so many different flies. They tie them themselves. It's an amazing process. And so we want to when we figure out the right bait, it should be something that only our target fish is attracted to. If we do this right, all the other fish will swim by. And that's really the idea of this. So those three things, what do I want to catch? Where are they? And then what bait do I need to put in the water are the essence of not just good event participation, good trade show participation, but it's the essence of really good marketing. All of our marketing should have that kind of alignment. And when you have it, it's going to be much more effective. It's going to be much more measurable, and ultimately much more successful and repeatable. Ultimately, we want to create systems. When you look at scaling, particularly scaling in a new country where you're going to have new management, you're going to have all sorts of new employees, you need to create a system for them that allows you to do that. So let's get real specific and talk about high leverage strategies to do this. So the U.S. market entry goal, just to repeat, our goal is to quickly and efficiently build traction and then to maximize our probability of success. So how we're going to maximize the probability of success is it's really kind of twofold. One is to get some early wins, to create that traction, but also at the same time begin building a repeatable process so that it can scale, we can get more people involved in it and move it forward much quicker, much more of a sales system. So our strategy, we're going to kind of boil this down to 6 steps. Just like there were 6 problems or 6 challenges, we're going to have 6 steps. So the first step is to create a very narrow and specific buyer persona. Just again, like choosing what kind of fish that we're going to catch. So we're going to start with probably an okay buyer persona. This is going to be a hypothesis, but the idea is over the course of time, and we'll talk specifically about how to do this, is we want to get to a very, very specific and narrow buyer persona. And a buyer persona, and there are tons of examples of these online, so I won't spend a lot of time. We've actually done some previous webinars on this, is ultimately you want to really detail who your buyer is, and very specifically, what are their goals, their challenges, all those types of things that would help us, figure out, number one, how to relate to them, but also 2, where we can find them, what channels we might be able to use to high leverage channels to be able to attract more of them. There are all sorts of different reasons why you want this, but ultimately we need to know what we want to catch. And again, not just the species, but we got to know the subspecies. Really important. Excuse me. And this is really helps us choose which paths to take, and we obviously want to stay away from the path with the thunder and lightning and go towards the path to the right with the sunshine. And too bad it doesn't have like a pot of gold at the end of a rainbow or something. That's kind of really what we're aiming at when we make the right decisions. So the second is we want to resist big bets. And we see this again all the time. Companies coming into the country identify the big event like going to CES or Bio or any of these sort of massive industry events, and they spend tons and tons of money, and not only that, time. And there are a variety of problems with this. Number one is there are very, very, very small fish in a big pond. And then two is there's only one of these sort of massive industry events a year, or this particular one only happens once a year. So the data you get from it and the ability to iterate is exceptionally limited. And at market entry, you want to iterate quickly. You want to learn and iterate quickly, because that's what's going to help you not only, again, get traction, but it's also going to help you scale. And I promise most companies at market entry, if they were successful at the major industry trade show, could not come anywhere close to managing that success, whether that is following up on all the leads and closing them effectively, or actually delivering, assuming, super success, actually delivering the revenue, which is the hard part. So we want to start off with these small tests, again, because we're building the system, we're building the process, and we want to fuel tons of small victories so that our team is really reinforced. So again, make many small and local frequent bets. So in the first 6 to 12 months, here's the idea. We want, we've sort of, wherever you end up landing, whatever geography is the sort of center, is there's a reason why you've landed there. And so we want to leverage that. So we want to, one of the real benefits in the US is that all these organizations that run the major national or international trade shows, also many of them have chapters, which are either at a state level or a region level. And just as an example, I'm in one of the smallest states, Connecticut, and the American Marketing Association and the American Medical Association have multiple chapters in the state, and that's true of many organizations. And so instead of again looking at these big events, look at the small events that are local and regional, that you can sleep in your own bed at night, and you can actually be participating in events every week. And so if you're familiar with A/B testing, and again, we've done some webinars on this, but the idea would be that you would test various hypotheses around your buyer persona, and who they are specifically, what value proposition they respond to, and then what offer converts them. And again, conversion is to the next step in the marketing funnel. It might be to a webinar, or to it could be to downloading a white paper, or completing some kind of an assessment that you offer. It could be all sorts of things. But ultimately, you want to create a situation where you're doing these A/B tests, and we at sometimes at events, while people are at lunch, we'll actually go and switch out everything, and in the afternoon do the B side of the test. So with the exact same audience in the same day, we can test all these things. So what we want to do is do that, and then take that information, and that will allow us to iterate and evolve very quickly. And so we want to continue to sort of document results and continue to test ideas. And it actually makes meetings much easier, because everybody throws out their hypothesis, and sometimes we make the mistake of arguing our point of view. What we usually do is say, that's a great hypothesis. Whatever point of view somebody has, there's a reason for it. We'll just develop a test to it. There's no reason to say it's a good idea or bad idea. Let's let the data decide. Let's let our target customers decide whether this type of value proposition is right or wrong. Let's take the personalities, let's take the sort of ego out of it, and actually focus on building a system that's agnostic. All we care about is bringing on board new and high value customers. So the system that you might do, and this is just throwing in, just picking a region of the country. I'm in Connecticut, which is just on the left side of the green circle here. But let's just say we're based in Providence, Rhode Island, which kind of is actually pretty handy. You can easily, if you're sort of 100 to 200 kilometer radius, you could easily get up towards Boston, maybe even get up into New Hampshire and Maine. But even looking to the left on this, you can cover most of Connecticut. You can get pretty darn close to New York, and certainly you could stretch this a bit to get down there. And that could be, you could easily do evening events, you could easily do full day events or half day events or whatnot, and and be home at night. And there's a great train system and besides the roads and driving and all that kind of fun stuff. So that's really what you're looking at is a high frequency of events, and in them you're going to do a high frequency of tests to validate kind of what you want to figure out. And again, all hypotheses are good. So we want to create alignment, really important. So that's going to mean that we want to align. Once we have determined who we're selling to, we want to align, and that being the buyer persona, we want to align all the events and the association memberships we have, all the marketing communication we have, the offers, the lead nurturing, the follow-up, all of that needs to align to that buyer persona. And we may actually have 2 or 3 or 4 buyer personas. I would resist having too many, particularly at an early stage, because we only have so much gunpowder. We have to be really conservative and focused on how we use it and leverage the bandwidth we have well and create density, both from a sales and marketing standpoint, but also from an operations standpoint. It's really important to have, especially at the early stages, some density and client type. So everything aligns to that target, to that fish we want to catch. So real simple. And then we want to localize communication. And the example that, or the thing that I think of in this is when I go to a foreign country, and I have to apologize that I'm an ignorant American, and as such, I speak one language, and I would say at times I don't even speak that all that well. So when I go to a foreign country, and when I'm hungry, and I'm at a restaurant, I want to order some food. My only mechanism to be better understood if the person who's helping me doesn't understand me is to speak louder. And of course, immediately that reveals my ignorance. And so I see a lot of marketing happening that way, where if somebody doesn't understand our point of view or what we're trying to say or communicate, what do? We just speak louder and louder and more frequently and louder and more frequently, thinking that that will help. Really, what we want to do is learn their language. We want to have audience-centered communication. We want to speak to people with language that resonates for them. It really actually doesn't matter what we say, it's what our audience hears. And so, again, this is exactly why we want to test. Again, we'll have all sorts of theories of what we should say, what color things should be, all that kind of stuff. It's all good, but let's take ego out of it. Let's just test a few different things. Maybe it's dozens of things until we find those that actually work the best. And again, we just want to have alignment. We want to be able to speak to those targets and all the different people involved in the buying decision in a way that is effective and resonates with them. So here's a big one, and this is one that may surprise several of you, and that is we want to remove salespeople from the booth. And the most normal thing we see is salespeople in the booth, and it's funny. You talk to salespeople after events, and they want to hang themselves or kill themselves, and it's quite often because there's tons of time being wasted in talking to people who aren't prospects. They end up coming home with a stack of cards that are people that aren't going to buy anything and just sort of wasted their time. So you want to have a higher and better use of the salespeople's time. So let's kind of back up from this just a little bit. So that the purpose of a booth, and what we're actually going to do, is split the trade show effort into two very distinct purposes. And we're going to define the purpose of a booth is to identify volumes of quality, I would even say high quality prospects. So we want to, if there are 10,000 people or 100,000 people at an event, we want to find the 10, the 20, the 50, the 100 or 200 that are actual prospects. And that's the job of the booth, is to separate the average attendee and from the prospects. So we can actually separate the chaff from the wheat, sort of the idea. And so that we can easily do that. Now, unfortunately, these people aren't labeled. So it's not simple how we do this, but we're on the road to doing this, and we'll share some ideas about how to do it. And so in order to get to prospects, we have to agree on what a prospect is. And so here's our way to define a prospect, and hopefully you find this helpful. And this may be simplistic, but sometimes we have to come back to the simple stuff in order to execute well. So a prospect has to have three qualities, and they have to have all three of these. Number one is they need to have a need. Number two is they need to have money or the resources to satisfy that need. And finally, they need to be urgent. In other words, an easy way to think of these three words or three concepts is need, money, now. And if you remember that, you're going to have a much easier time assessing whether someone's a prospect or not. So, and again, if you find somebody that has a need and money, but they're not urgent, they're going to never make a decision. They're going to sit in your funnel forever and just take up space and attention. And likewise, if you find somebody who has money and they have some kind of urgency, but they don't really have a need, ultimately it's going to be very hard to convert them as well, because whatever you sell them isn't going to have an application. So again, we want to separate the prospects from the other attendees. Somehow, our prospects need to jump out of the floor, or jump out of the aisle into our booth, into our presence, and essentially opt in. Because if they opt in, they're going to self-identify as a prospect, as opposed to us superimposing the idea of somebody being a prospect, which is never good. We cannot cause somebody to have a need. We cannot cause somebody to have money or cause them to be urgent. They have to, all of those things, they need to self-represent or self-motivate to. So let's just do some simple math on why we have this point of view. So when we have sales conversations in the booth, let's just assume an 8-hour day. Those conversations are normally at least 15 minutes. So simple math tells us that we can only have 32 of these conversations in a day, and that's without a lunch break. That's without any type of bio break or any other kind of break. We can get 32 of these conversations in the day. If there are 10,000 people, which isn't that big of a trade show, even let's say 1,000 people, let's say it's a 3-day event, that's not going to be very many on a percentage basis. So what we want are people in the booth who are more transaction oriented, who are trained in terms of engagement and conversion. And again, all we're trying to do in the booth, we're not trying to close a sale, we're not trying to qualify. We want people to self-qualify. Is let's again assume an 8-hour day, and only needing 1 to 2 minutes for a conversation, we can have very easily over 200 and approaching 300 conversations in a day, and maybe even as many as 400 per person. And all of those will be much better and much more qualifying than anything that generally salespeople will do, because salespeople quite often are answering questions, telling people, essentially doing a product sale in the booth. If you have people, all we want to do is identify people who are prospects, which means they need to have the problem that we solve. And so we need bait in the booth that has people opt in, not to our solution, but to the problem. And so, again, we've done webinars on this. We're happy to chat with folks offline on this, but it's really, really important. And again, we have all the ingredients now. We have a real understanding of who we're targeting and where they are and what gets them to opt in or gets them to nibble on our bait. So now, ultimately, we need to create the bait that causes that to happen. But we want the salespeople, instead of being in the booth, we want them in one-on-one meetings with people who are already in the funnel. And so when you think about it, again, we talked about that marketing funnel. People need to go from awareness to intimacy to trust, and at trust they agree to an appointment. Salespeople should be with people who are already in the sales funnel, and that means they're already a sort of a qualified prospect. Maybe they have a proposal. Maybe they're an existing customer that we can penetrate deeper and get more business from. Maybe add another division or two. Or maybe they're a strategic partner opportunity, but the salespeople should have anywhere from 5 to 10 meetings a day at trade shows, because all these people, like all these people have traveled in from long distances. And so the efficiency of doing these one-on-one meetings at events is really good, besides the fact that you've got so much more reinforcement there, so much more credibility. The idea of further penetrating or closing new business with people who are in the funnel is so much more likely than doing it via phone. So you want to really leverage that time. And so again, having this all preset so that time for the salespeople is all really effective. And your executives who are there should be a part of that process as well, so that they're much better utilized. And actually, you're going to come home with closed business, which is kind of what it's all about. Let's let the prospect identification process happen separately. That the salespeople don't need to be involved in that. In fact, again, they're just going to slow it up. So yeah, the best process here causes your non-prospects to swim by your booth, and only your prospects to nibble on the bait and ultimately swallow the hook. And so you want to. That's really what the process is aiming to do. So, and then finally here, the number 6 strategy is we can't have spoilage. Ultimately, the prospects that we create are just the same as fruit and vegetables that are in the market. Is they have a shelf life, and it's usually just a day or a couple of days until they spoil. And so we need to make sure that we've got really good systems to follow up, and partly why we want to have a strategy early on of having a lot of events or more events frequently, so that we are and smaller events, so that we're getting small numbers of prospects that can be followed up on quickly, and we can scale that as our team grows, as our competence grows, all that, and our confidence, but all that will happen. And it really works very well, because the worst thing to do is to get more leads than you can manage and ultimately follow up on well. You want to kind of create leads as you need them. So follow up, follow up, follow up. So there are all sorts of statistics on this. Here's just one. 2% of sales are made on the first contact, all the way down to 80% of sales are made on the 5th to 12th contact. So it's not one interaction. It is a series of interactions. And it's not just calling to say, are we ready? Are we ready? Are we ready? There's a variety of things that are going to influence people. Everything from what might be in our e-news, to what webinars we'll do, to what assessments are available for our clients. There are all sorts of ways that we can build reputation. Even this, 48% of salespeople never follow up with a prospect. That's insane, right? That's nearly 50%. So we can make ourselves different immediately by having good follow-up. and that's real important. So we've gone this full circuit here. We've talked about a variety of techniques for helping us both establish traction and also to scale sales. And we could go on for hours in this, but this should whet our appetite and our sort of understanding. And now we're going to, in just a minute, hop over to your questions. But I want to first share with you, next Tuesday, we're going to have a really cool webinar. And this is kind of it'll be a different format. It's going to be a conversation between myself and Michael Vigent from Great Blue Research. And their expertise is helping companies understand the market they're going into. So the title of this is going to be What You Don't Know Can Kill Your Business, Nailing Market Research for U.S. Market Entry. So we'll be sending out a link for that later today in the follow-up email to this webinar. So certainly we invite you to sign up for that. Please join us. It's going to be an hour later on Tuesday, so it'll be at noon Eastern U.S. time. And again, if it fits what you're looking for, or you know companies that this would be an interest for, please forward it on. We certainly invite all to join us. So again, should be really fun. And I should say Michael is an awesome guy. He's going to be very funny. It'll be very fast paced, and he always has really good information. So I'm going to go back on screen here, and we'll go to your questions. I at least wanted to pop my contact information up at this point so that you could see this. The phone number on is both my mobile and it's also on WhatsApp. Feel free to ping me anytime. Also, my email address, bill@meetroi.com. Feel free to reach out. Certainly happy to answer more questions. There may be, and one of the challenges of answering questions without a lot of interactivity is that sometimes I won't fully understand the question, so I won't fully answer the question. So if I do answer your question, but it's not complete, please feel free to reach out, or there are some additional questions you have on this topic or ways that we can help you, just let us know. So let me get back on screen here, and I will be, let's see, stop sharing, and there I am. Okay, so cool. It is so good to see you all again. So let me hop over, and I'm going to look to the right periodically to see if any questions have been put in here. I'm just going to type in test really quick. For some reason it says the chat's been disconnected, but I just put in a test note, and hopefully you all see that. Of course, I could say if you don't, let me know, but of course, if the chat's disconnected, that won't work. So if you can submit questions and you'd like to submit more, again, if that's a problem at all, we can certainly dialogue offline very easily. So let me get to your questions. The first few here are very similar, so I'm going to group them together. So let's see, which event, so the question is about which event to go to, what investment regarding ads or booth lead to bigger ROI? And the next question that's in the same vein, there are so many trade shows in our industry, how do you pick the right one? And then another similar one, our industry has many trade shows. How do we pick the ones that are best for us? So yeah, very similar questions. And so let's kind of really understand this. You can't do anything until you choose who you're targeting. So let's start with that as our true north. What's that, that buyer persona? Who are they? And again, you may have a few different buyer personas. I would approach at market entry, I would approach any of your buyer personas as absolutely a hypothesis, right? So you may, whatever you know at home is what you know at home, and it may not, and what we find quite often is that it's still a hypothesis for many companies entering home. They haven't necessarily A/B tested personas, and so the U.S. is kind of an opportunity. As you enter a new market, it's an opportunity to do things different. But once you know who you're targeting or have some hypotheses, then you're going to select events that align with attracting those people. And the events are likewise a hypothesis. So, and again, this is why tracking results is so important. And so you have the ability to look at your results, your conversion by event, the number of qualified prospects that you got by event, and also the number of new appointments, first appointments you got by event. And you might measure that 15 days after the event, or 30 days after the event, or 60 days, whatever. But ultimately, those then become statistics, not only to measure that event against itself next year or in the next time period, but also all of your events together against, so include the cost, and you can kind of come up with a rate, sort of a cost per appointment, which can become a really effective thing. And of course, once in B2B or B2G sales, once you have an appointment, it's really just a formula from there to figure out, how many proposals you need to create, how many new customers. And so, you need this number of appointments to create a proposal, and you need this number of proposals to create a new customer. And so it's really just fairly easy math from there. And if you measured that sort of process for a quarter, 3 months, you could actually have a pretty valid number. And so again, you could actually go into events saying, we need to get X number of quality prospects at this event, and if we do, we know that will create X number of new customers. It's not hard to get to that kind of metrics. We do it all the time, and we help companies with it all the time. So, and again, that then allows you to benchmark your events, actually go back and negotiate with your event hosts about the return you're getting on the lower performing events. It gives you lots and lots of flexibility. It also helps you manage people and build expectations, has lots and lots of benefits. Besides how much you can change what you do, it's difficult to manage and or improve what you're not measuring. So, but the specific answer is here, everything you're going to do in terms of choosing events is going to come from having somebody, a buyer persona, or that fish, that species, specific species and subspecies that you're aiming at, and obviously you're going to go to the places where they are, that specific target. And then how do we get segmentation and access to the right customers? So customers are going to, I should say prospects are going to separate themselves. If you go to the right event, the prospects are going to separate themselves by the offer you have. And the offer should be somehow related to something that is keeping that person awake at night. So, it should be something that they go, they're walking, and remember, half the people that are at events are introverts. So people are walking down the aisle, chances are their head and eyes are to the ground, at least in some cases. And whatever your offer is needs to be obvious and provocative enough that they go, holy smokes, I need to know more about this. That particular thing is, I need to solve it. And so the goal is, of course, this isn't probably a problem that everybody has. So those that don't have the problem, and this isn't what's keeping them up at night, they walk on by. So the people that opt in, that swim in, are those that actually have the problem. As a kid, I had lobster traps. If you know anything about lobster traps, and if you don't, Google it. But lobster traps are sort of ingenious of the way they bring lobsters in. There's actually a multiple stage system, so that only lobsters come in, and actually they have a very specific bait that brings them in. And it's funny, lobster traps don't catch crabs; they just catch lobsters. So let's see, how do we meet the right business partners? It's really, with business partners, it's going to be the same strategy as it would be with prospects. It's, go to events where they are, and then have the right languaging, offer, value proposition that they're going to respond to. Let's see, we've had great success at industry trade shows in our current markets. Should we keep the same type of events or change as we come to the US? So what you've learned in your home market is very good. That's wonderful. And certainly it is a place to start when you're coming in for market entry. I think the thing that I would just suggest is be open to learning and have systems that cause you to learn and either prove or disprove your hypotheses. And so, again, don't be fixed in terms of how you look at this. And in fact, let's just say we were optimal today. It's June 20th, 2019. If we keep doing the same things, we will not be optimal for both who we're targeting and where we're fishing for them and what we're using to convert them on June 20th of 2020. Even if we're right today, we need to continue to evolve and optimize going forward because our marketplace and our customer is evolving. So we need to be nimble and open to evolving with them. So again, what from your home market is a great starting place. But chances are where you are is much more, you're still at a hypothesis stage, and that's good. I mean, we talked to some very sophisticated companies who haven't yet defined really succinctly who they're targeting and what where they're going and what their real clear offer is. So market entry companies, it's probably not much different, and certainly our experience is that most are still in the process of understanding that, but we can really accelerate that process and create much more certainty, because again, the only way we're going to scale is if we create systems, and systems are going to enable our empowerment of our people and our network to help us and enable that scaling. So let's see, how do we attract the right people to the booth? Very simply, we have to have the right bait. And as I described with a business to business or business to government sale, start with what's keeping our target buyer persona awake at night, and have an offer that relates to that is something that would cause them to stop and take notice and come in and identify themselves. Really, this is, if you're familiar with inbound marketing, which is an online technique, this is in-person inbound marketing. Very, very similar. If you've gotten familiar with some of those techniques, it's very similar. What's the most cost-effective way to build a booth for a trade show and be able to reuse it in different U.S. cities? We have some great partners for this. In fact, if you go to our website, you'll see our partner page. There is at least one, if not multiple, companies listed on there, and we're happy to refer you to others. If we had a brief conversation and talked about what you're looking for, we can get you to the best provider. But there are great companies in this space that both will create wonderful sort of displays, also ones that are convertible. So as you learn, it's easy to change the messaging, change the graphics that are on them. Ones that can convert to different sizes and just different configurations, or more static ones. So depending on what you're looking to do, chances are we can help you connect to a really good company for that. We don't create the hardware, but we certainly can help facilitate the process and give you really good connections. So I'm not sure of the context of this question, but I think it's just simply two words: expensive model. I think what the person's getting at is doing trade shows is expensive. And I would say you're absolutely right if you're doing them the traditional way we see people do trade shows, which is much more, I would say, around branding than it is about prospect identification and closing people that are already in the funnel. I would say you're absolutely right. But we're actually proving every day with our clients that a different way of going at trade shows and utilizing in-person events is highly efficient, particularly with B2B and B2G prospects. So again, I don't at all disagree going with what is sort of the way most people do trade shows. But I think there's another way that you can look at doing them that would really significantly change the results and make it on the higher end of anything you would do from a standpoint of ROI. And ultimately, marketing, the biggest thing that sort of we've learned over time is that trade shows are just part of, or in-person events are just part of an overall marketing strategy. And so this, what we're doing is really, it's not just about sort of optimizing sort of events, it's actually utilizing events to complement all of the other modes of marketing. And so that's really the goal of what you want to do. And in that context, events are insanely productive. And so that's the idea. So are there services? The last question here is: are there services to facilitate this process? It's kind of a helpful question, and why I put it last is it allows me just to talk a little bit about our partner page or our partner network. So not only are we in this space and we do a lot to support companies that are entering the US, but we also have a very good and growing network. And if you go to our partner page on our website, that's just some of the companies that we can introduce you to and connect you out to. But our first goal in developing this partner network is really first to identify companies that support revenue generation. We're growing that network now beyond revenue generation to all other areas of soft landing or market entry. But certainly, if this is an area you're interested in, if whether it's for developing and being very confident about the strategy, or adding bandwidth to your existing team at a variable cost, and really sort of lighting it on fire in terms of accelerating the process of growth and creating maybe a bit more certainty around market entry success, then we would love to chat with you. And again, whether we're the right provider or not, we're more than happy to make connections for you. I would say it is one of our greatest superpowers, is the ability to get to know people well and make really good connections for them. So with that, I think we're kind of at the end of our time. I've gone through all the questions that were pre-submitted. I'm just looking over, and I don't see any additional questions. And it may be that for whatever reason the technology isn't working, which is totally the way technology is. So I would highly encourage you to shoot me a note with any other questions. I'll be following up later today with a link to this webinar, and certainly you can just reply to that with any questions. I'd also love to chat more with any of you that would either like to talk more about how we might work together, or if there are other resources you need or connections that would be helpful. More than glad to have that conversation. And with that, I think that covers it. I don't see any other submitted questions. And so it is now actually noontime here on the US East Coast. It's a rainy day in Connecticut. I'm just looking up through a skylight. Hopefully it's sunny where you are. And I'm going to sign off now and go have some lunch. But you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you for joining us. And we'll look forward to talking with you all real soon. Thanks so much. Bye for now.